I'm not sure if you know this, but in the ISF course which trains calibrators, it's often taught that contrast is the most important attribute of picture quality, and the 75-inch TCL C855 I'm reviewing today is a Mini LED contrast king. Let me explain why. 1. It uses a VA-type LCD panel that boasts a native contrast ratio of 7000 to 1, as measured on a 4x4 ANSI checkerboard pattern with local dimming disabled, which is higher than that we've recorded on any other non-TCL Mini LED TV so far. This is helped in no small part by TCL's decision to refrain from implementing a viewing angle compensation filter, which would have not only lowered the native contrast, but also introduced distracting rainbow reflections across a larger area on screen when hit by light. 2. The 75-inch TCL C855 is equipped with 2,160 independently dimmable zones in a 60x36 grid, translating to the highest number of local dimming zones we've counted on the 75-inch Mini LED TV. And 3. TCL's local dimming algorithm prioritizes achieving higher contrast over preserving picture accuracy. So overall, you should see inkier blacks and less blooming artifacts than competing non-TCL Mini LED televisions on the market. However, to obtain such a result, certain compromises would have to be made, such as some crushing of shadow detail, not to mention small bright elements being dimmed down against a dark background to minimize halation, which is also responsible for a vignetting effect at the periphery of bright objects on screen. Next, colors. Now, calibration software providers, portrait displays, and in particular Light Illusion have worked with TCL to add support for 3D LUT calibration, but we think it's a bit of an overkill, because similar to the recent TCL TVs we've tested to date, engaging local dimming on the C855 would cause the luminance, gamma, and color temperature to vary between different window sizes and APLs, which means that even though you've calibrated the TV to perfection on a 10% window, the resulting luminance and color accuracy won't transfer across to real-world content in a faithful manner anyway. The same phenomenon can be seen in HDR10 mode too, where the EOTF could track fairly close to PQ after calibration on a 10% window, but then would measure significantly brighter than reference on a slightly larger 15% window. As a direct consequence, the TCL C855 would display most HDR scenes in a noticeably brighter manner than what's presented by a Sony HX3110 mastering monitor, therefore deviating from the creative intent. Respected calibrator Maciek Koper of Vibus.tv in Poland, who reviewed the C855 a few months ago, tipped me off that you can use the HDR peak brightness setting in the picture menu to adjust the tone curve, and after a lot of experimentation, since the measurement charts did not reflect real-world presentation anyway, entering a figure of 5000 nits on our review unit got it reasonably close to reference in terms of APL across many HDR titles, although this would also cause darker portions of the image to look more washed out and lacking in shadow detail. This is unfortunately a limitation of TCL's local dimming algorithm that cannot be rectified through picture settings adjustments. When it came to actual measurements, the TCL C855 featured an undefeatable boost mode that could temporarily drive HDR peak brightness to above 4000 nits for a few seconds before settling down at around 2400 nits on a 10% window after calibration to D65 white point. Full screen luminance was 800 nits, which should be more than bright enough to overcome ambient light in even the sunniest UK living room. DCI P3 color gamut coverage came in at 97% in UV terms, whereas REC 2020 coverage was 78%, with the underlying spectral power distribution showing beautifully distinct red, green, and blue peaks typical of quantum dot technology. Besides vanilla HDR10 and HLG, the TCL C855 also supports HDR10+ and Dolby Vision dynamic metadata formats. However, even in the most accurate Dolby Vision dark picture preset, the Dolby Vision presentation was far too bright according to both objective measurements and subjective viewing using a 4000 nit reference monitor displaying the HDR10 version as benchmark. which unfortunately couldn't be rectified using the aforementioned HDR peak brightness trick, since the setting isn't even available in Dolby Vision mode. Even with motion clarity disabled, the TCL C855 correctly performed 5.5 pull-down to display slow panning shots in 24 frames per second movies without telecinic judder. Engaging motion clarity would unlock further motion processing options, namely LED motion clear backlight scanning, as well as blur reduction and judder reduction motion interpolation settings, which are independently adjustable to enhance motion clarity or smoothness respectively, depending on your requirements. TCL's motion algorithm was still not as polished as that seen on A brands, with the C855 exhibiting the odd microstutter immediately after scene cuts in 50Hz football broadcast, even with motion clarity set to off. The same can be said of the upscaling quality on the C855, where upconversion of this SMPTE RP133 test card looked slightly softer and noisier than TVs from Japanese and South Korean manufacturers, but at least overscan can be disabled with standard definition content. Thanks to the implementation of a new MediaTek Pantonic 700 chipset, native 10-bit gradation was supremely impressive on the TCL C855, outperforming even the pricier Sony Bravia 9 in dark gradation. For instance, during this low-light sequence from the 4K Blu-ray of The Green Knight when played in HDR10. Furthermore, our 75-inch TCL C855 review unit was one of the cleanest Mini LED TVs we've come across when it comes to screen uniformity, manifesting minimal bending and dirty screen effect on full-field gray slides, though the sides appeared noticeably tinted and darker owing to the narrower viewing angles of the VA-type LCD panel. In game mode, input lag measured 15 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, which could be reduced further to 9.5 milliseconds by setting refresh rate to performance mode that essentially performs frame doubling to 120 FPS. Feeding the TCL C855 a true 120 frames per second video signal resulted in an impressively low input lag of 5.5 milliseconds. But there's a catch. You see, on the latest firmware version at the time we tested this TV in November 2024, engaging local dimming, even on the least aggressive low setting, would increase input lag by almost 18 milliseconds, making the 75 C855 uncompetitive for playing fast action games if you want to enjoy inky blacks and better picture quality. Otherwise, the new MediaTek Pantonic 700 SoC not only allowed for 4K 120Hz Dolby Vision gaming from the Xbox Series X, but also yielded smoother gradation on the Display HDR app, as well as full 444 chroma at 4K 144Hz. 3 upgrades over last year's C845 we tested without a Pantonic chipset. As before, only 2 out of 4 HDMI ports supported the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second. Thankfully, TCL has at least managed to migrate eARC functionality to one of the 2 4K 60Hz HDMI 2.0 ports on the C855, thus truly freeing up the 2 HDMI 2.1 ports for those intending to use eARC with an external soundbar or home theater system. When it came to adjusting the HDRG values in the HDR calibration screen on the Xbox Series X, the TCL C855 clipped at 900 nits, which is much earlier than expected given the TV's measured peak brightness, likely caused by TCL's HDR10 algorithm, which tended to overbrighten the picture. VRR including NVIDIA G-Sync worked well to eliminate tearing and frame drops, and unlike on OLED TVs with a lower black floor, VRR flicker was virtually non-existent on the TCL C855 when tested using this challenging intro from Tell Me Why. At the back of the TV, you can find an Onkyo branded woofer and up-firing speakers which contribute to the onboard 2.1.2 sound system, delivering above-average audio by TV standards, with decent bass and volume sufficient for casual viewing. Listening to feedback, TCL has made the mute icon go away a few seconds after muting the volume, but there were still a few software quirks. Do not be tempted to switch Apply All Picture mode from the default factory setting of Current Source to All Source. Otherwise, the SDR brightness value will carry over to HDR, and vice versa. Interestingly, the Dolby Vision picture modes are not equipped with the Apply All Picture Mode setting, so occasionally the lower SDR brightness value would carry over to Dolby Vision, requiring manual adjustments to unlock the highest peak brightness, which can be pretty frustrating at times. In addition, the Go to Last Input option would occasionally have no effect on our review unit with the latest firmware installed, causing the TV to default to the Google TV home screen from time to time upon power up. Let's summarize. The TCL C855 is a highly spec'd Mini LED TV, providing several hardware upgrades over last year's C845, such as higher peak brightness, more local dimming zones, and most importantly, a new MediaTek Pantonic 700 chipset, which brings smoother native 10-bit gradation and 4K 144Hz Dolby Vision gaming support, among other things. The TV also features a VA-type LCD panel with the highest native contrast ratio on the market, quantum dot colors, and multi-HDR support. Yet somehow this 75-inch model cost just a smidgen over £1,500 in the UK, and so the TCL C855 receives our recommended Best Value Award. Now, at this price, you have to understand that the C855 won't be the last word in picture accuracy and video processing. Its motion handling and upscaling were not as refined as those observed on A brands, while its HDR presentation tended to deviate from the creative intent due to the company's aggressive local dimming algorithm. And of course, no Mini LED TV can match the blacks and shadow detail accuracy of OLED televisions that boast pixel-level light control. But some of you may still prefer to buy a Mini LED TV over an OLED TV, especially in light of several issues which are unique to OLED, which I've covered in this video you can watch by clicking here.